Well, hello everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, somewhere where you are in this lovely world. Thanks so much for joining us here live for the one and only Serverless Office Hours. We are streaming live on the AWS Twitch channel, on YouTube, Serverless LAN channel, and also via LinkedIn Live. I'm Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate as part of the Serverless team here at AWS. And I'm super happy to have a first-time guest on Serverless Office Hours, Santiago Flores-Canta. Santi, tell us what you do at AWS and what brought you to what you were doing today.
Sounds good. Hi, Julian. Thank you for having me today. My name is Santi. I work as a solutions architect for AWS. I am based in Colorado in the United States. I mostly work with customers that are digital native to the cloud. So all of their infrastructure is in the cloud. Very advanced customers, really love working with them. In my journey with GenAI, I started this 2 years ago with all this fuss about LLMs, foundational models, all that started. And I really tried to dive deep into it and eventually became a specialist in ML, got my specialist certification 2 months ago. And now I'm happy to be presenting Anthropic Cloud 3 models to the audience.
Excellent. Well, we're obviously going to hear a huge amount from Santi today. But yeah, just looking back over the past week on the whole world of serverless. See, I've got a space there between personalized. But yeah, last week we were also doing a bit of GenAI goodness. Cornelio was talking about a GenAI web app he's built, doing some food analytics and yeah, really personalized stuff. Also really good with some GenAI models. So I'm glad we're on a roll with a bit of the GenAI kind of stuff. And these are actually use cases that are beyond chatbots and some really cool applications that are being done. So that is on our stream on Serverless LAN, youtube.com/serverlesslan, along with all other previous Serverless Office Hours stream. A really nice back catalog of really useful videos, which is probably worth perusing. In terms of what's new in the world of serverless, second one down got a lot of interest, which is actually really cool. That Amazon S3 had a sort of little feature that sort of went unexpected until somebody spotted it out, where if people were getting some HTTP error codes, people were still being charged for that access. So S3 has turned that around really quickly and amended that. So obviously, less charge always going to be a good thing if that was to affect you. And the top one as well, a big ask for lots of customers, security conscious customers, as all customers generally should be. Well, now you can use custom managed keys for EventBridge event buses. And yeah, just another good thing to be able to give you the confidence to use EventBridge in your regulated industry. In terms of some compute blog posts that have come out recently, the top one is actually interesting about a circuit breaker pattern, using a feature of Lambda called extensions and using DynamoDB to, if you've got some downstream services that you need to allow access or cache access, or if it's going down to notify you, this is just a great architectural pattern, and now you can expose that in a really nice Lambda-friendly way. It is AWS Summit season, and the Berlin Summit was actually last week. I think Spot about and crossed that one out. But yeah, Dubai is coming up next. I think there are going to be some additional summits. The summits are hugely attractive. Huge amounts of people are going, lots of free technical content, and there are workshops and talks and gathering places, and yeah, lots going on with AWS summits in the summit season. So I suggest if a summit is coming near you and you want to learn more about AWS, that is a great place and event to go. This week, as Santi was talking about in the beginning, it's all about Bedrock and Claude 3 and GenAI. So Santi, sort of give us the basics here. We talk a lot about GenAI. There are a lot of different kind of models. We've talked generally about models on Serverless Office Hours before. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Anthropic and Claude 3 today. Why should people care specifically about Claude 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at all the models that are available, right? Claude 3 comes out with one of the most smartest ones that are out there, right? So the Anthropic team has done a great job on not only providing a very good model, but providing 3 of them that have different capabilities that we're going to look at that in more details during the presentation. But in a nutshell, to answer your question, Julian, is a very small module. It's available via Bedrock, so you don't need to onboard a new vendor or anything like that. You can just make an API call, and it's ready to use.
Okay, so is that I suppose the part of it's then the Bedrock use case, that's just easy. It's not another vendor, it's just another API call. Obviously, you've got to format things for different kind of models. But then, yeah, Claude and all its capabilities. So it's the sort of marry of the two worlds, the great models, and then just an easy way to consume it. Is that how people should think about it?
Exactly, you got it.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, where do we go from here? How do people start? Or how would you explain what we should be looking at?
Yeah, so let me just go ahead and look and share the screen really quick.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you talk about the Cloud 3 in particular, it's very important, and with any model, I would say, it's very important just taking a step back and understand what the model is best for, right? There is not a single model that will rule them all, right? There has been more and more evidence that you shouldn't use a single model for everything. That's the model that if you're doing things like basic chat, but it doesn't need too much intelligence, you don't need to have something very intelligent. And on the other side, if you're looking to things with agents and function calling, maybe that makes more sense. Something else you can see here is that as you increase the intelligence of the models, usually cost and latency will go up, right? And that's why Claude 3 has three different models. That's the strategy behind Anthropic bringing three models instead of just one, right? And Haiku is, I will say, it's very smart, right? It's very smart as it is, but it's very fast too. Now, if you need more intelligence, you can go to Sonnet, which is the second one that you see in the slide. And finally, if you need something more intelligent than that, go to Opus, right? So I would recommend customers to start with Haiku, right? It's the faster, it's very intelligent. And then if you need something more, then go to Sonnet. And then if you need something more, then go to Opus, because you will be, it will be cost a little more, and also you will have a little more latency. So I always try to start with Haiku first and go from there, right? Now, keep in mind this comparing model thing. This is, and of course, I couldn't help but have a very complicated slide, right? That's something we need to do as architects sometimes. But what I want to show in this slide is not for you to just see everything in and just read everything, but it's just a way that you can compare multiple models out there. Now, keep in mind that you should compare it against your use case, but this just gives you a good snapshot of how things are in the industry. Also, keep in mind that you might not comparing apples to apples here. For example, Cloud 3 Opus is comparable to GPT-4 or the latest version of GPT that came back, I think, 2 weeks ago. But Haiku is more comparable with GPT 3.5 Turbo. So those things needs to keep in mind. But at the end, what one needs to do is just test. We're going to go through some things how you can test different behaviors of the model for your use case, and from there uh, make the decision or try multiple models and make a decision from there. Does that make sense, Julian?
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, I mean, I knew there were multiple Claude 3 models, but I didn't sort of realize there was this this access that you could think about them. And yeah, compared to the other kind of models, and yeah, you always think, as the new models are coming up with 7 billion and probably 10 trillion by the end of the week, all these parameters, you think, oh, that's great, that's great, that's great, it's got to be better, surely got to be better. But obviously, with the bigger size of the model, it's going to be more expensive to run, and sometimes you don't always need that functionality. So, specifically in the cloud, we thinking a lot about costs. So, yeah, you don't need to be driving a Ferrari all the time. Sometimes a little Ford Fiesta is what is going to get you from A to B, and I suppose that's a really bad analogy for a model, but hopefully you get what I'm getting.
Yeah, absolutely. You got it, right? And here are some of the things that have been improved in this new generation. So for those in the audience that have used 2.1, this is the previous version, now we're in Cloud 3, there are sort of things that the Anthropic team has done to make the model easier to use. It's faster. You don't need to explain too much what you needed to do in order to get the intent that you're trying to do. It's bigger and it's more intelligent, so it's more accurate. And something very important, Julian, is that now it supports another modality. You not only can send it text, but also vision. We open a new set of capabilities. And actually, I have a demo later today that we're going to go to see how vision can be implemented in your application using Lambda and gather insights from there. So stay tuned. We were going to get there soon.
Yeah, because that's also interesting as well. Because your comment earlier resonated when you said there isn't one model to rule them all. You're going to use different models for different kinds of things. But I suppose this does muddy the water slightly when these new models are coming up, when they are able to do multiple things. It's not going to be everything, obviously, but
right.
Yeah, when you use a separate model for vision and use one for text, and now a new model comes out that can use vision and text, that I suppose does change the thinking of how these models are evolving.
Exactly. And to give you an idea of how these three models compare against each other, right? And how is the speed of how they can process, in this case, text. If we go to the right side, Haiku, which is the fastest one, can read 35,000 words in under 2 seconds. That's mind-blowing, right? And then as you go to more intelligent models, to Sonnet or Opus, the word that they can read in under 2 seconds, it's less, but you get more intelligence from that. So again, just going back to those trade-offs, right? it's okay to use the biggest models, right? But sometimes you just can go with smaller ones, like or less intelligence, like the Haiku, which, by the way, is really intelligent. I want to say that it's not intelligent; it's really good, and go from there. If you need more than that, go to Sonnet and Opus, right?
What is interesting is the haiku. I thought the haiku would be the smallest poem, so I thought that would be the actual smallest thing. It's interesting. The model
Yeah,
names are
no,
the other way around in my
exactly.
head. The opus is the big, the big piece of work.
Well, you know what they say, Julian? There are two main things that are really hard in computer science: naming things and cache invalidation.
Yeah, there
So
we go.
I will let that pass to the Anthropic team. I think they did a good job overall. So now we're talking about vision, right? And these are some of the things that you can pass to the model and to get insights for them. So they're kind of, let's call it, quote, classical use case, like, is this package broken? Is my car broken too, right? Those type of things. But you can also send text in images, right? You can also send diagrams. I have been testing this with architecture diagrams that I do for different reasons, and it comes back with the overall description of how that architecture diagram is, which is very impressive. So keep in mind that it's not only for the use case of things that you might take a picture of, but also diagrams and handwritten text and things like that, right? Now, another very interesting feature I want to discuss with you today is how this has been improved for what is called agentic capabilities. Now, imagine this situation. Imagine that I have an application that it tells the weather, and I want to support natural language processing. So I was just going to use Claude 3 for this. Now, you go to my app and say, give me the weather for the UK, right? For London, for example. Now, Claude 3 doesn't have any way to know what is the weather at that time. It has been trained with data before us today. So there's no way that it can do it. However, there are ways that Claude can realize and say, I don't have that information. So I'm going to ask a function to be called so I can get this information. So the flow will be you send a request saying, give me the London weather. The app send that to Claude. Claude 3 say, I don't know, but please execute this get weather function for me. The app does that without you knowing. Send that back to Claude, and then Claude responds back to you with the information, right? So these are ways that you can integrate and increase the capability of Claude 3 with pretty much anything that code can do for you. So it's very powerful.
Is the agentic that sort of coordination of, because we hear about RAG and the vector databases where you upload additional information and the model can use that new information. Is the agentic capabilities leveraging that, or am I missing something?
Yeah, I mean, the agentic capability is using part of that. The orchestration of what is going to be called and when it's going to be called, Claude can do it, right? But the actual call itself, no, it's going to be basically a kind of a communication between Claude and the app according to a specific strings that you will find in the output of the model, like, let's say, function call tags. And so the app will detect that and say, oh, Claude needs this function. But the decision of when and what function to call, Claude can do it. It's smart to understand how that's done.
Okay.
All right, so let's just switch gears a little bit and make sure that we touch base on the safety. And I promise we're getting on the end of presentations and we're going to go to the actual fun stuff of within the code. So, but bear with me. I just want to make sure we know this because it's important, right? I don't know if you know, Julian, but actually the team that founded Anthropic, which is the company that makes the Cloud 3 model, actually was part of the security team of OpenAI. So when they left OpenAI and created Anthropic, they built this with security on top of mind, right? And here you can see, and on this graph is even for Cloud 3, which is the previous generation, how well it performed with jailbreak. Jailbreak is a technique that people use to make models to answer kind of things that they shouldn't, or they haven't been made to answer. For example, harmful content. So Cloud is very powerful now. It's made from the start to be able to handle those type of situations. So it's very safe.
I love that we're reusing the term jailbreak. I remember jailbreaking phones to get apps on them years and years ago.
Yeah.
Similar concept. I like it.
Yeah, things come back around. All right. Now, I do also want to touch case really quick on what are the different use cases that we're going to do they can do with Claude. We're going to see in the demo vision capabilities and content generation mostly, but there are many, many other things that we can do, and this is not an exhaustive list. Things like dialogue and role play, like you can ask Claude to be a coach, a personal training coach, or a support agent. You can also ask for summarization. If you work for a legal company that has a bunch of new laws that need to process, you can upload that. Some of them, Cloud, of course, it has a limit of how much text you can put into the prompt, but it's very good for summarization and Q&A. Translation as well. That's a main thing that came in Cloud 3. And I'm a native speaker Spanish. I am from Argentina, actually. By the way, I'm proud of my soccer team. They won the World Cup. Or in England, we should tell it football, right, Julian? But I'm the US, I will just stay with soccer. Anyways, coming back to
one of the best steaks and red wines I've ever had in my life has been in Mendoza in Argentina. So I've
there you go.
Good memories of seeing the vineyards in the Andes. So.
Yeah, all right. Sorry about that. Let's come back to Claude 3. I was making that point because I did test it with Spanish and it works pretty well too. Database querying and retrieval is also something that Claude can do. If you explain the schema and what calls it should do, it can create SQL statements that you can execute against your databases. Some coding-related tasks like creating test cases or example code or review your code is very good at it too. Classification and metadata extractions. If you have a feed of social media comments and things like that, you want to classify them according to which products are those, or if they're good or bad reviews, those type of things. Text and content generation, such as drafting emails for you, creating data stories for BI applications, and finally, content moderation, right? And with content moderation, we might think about bad and good things, but also you can use content moderation to scope your application. So let's say that your application will only support 3 topics and nothing else. You can use Claude to make sure that whatever questions come from the users are related to the 3 topics. Otherwise, return a predefined answer like, I can't answer that specific question. Right?
So that's, I suppose, part of the safety things. It's not quite the jailbreaking, but it's got this, content moderation that you can stay within the bounds, and it's not going to go off the rails, so to speak, and do some strange things.
Exactly.
Okay.
And all of this can be done with 200 plus languages, right? You can add retrieval augmented generation to improve this. And for those that don't know, see it, that this is a very simplified explanation, but see this as a very effective way to search articles. So you can pass Claude the different data that needs to answer questions, such as support cases, for example. And tool use or function calling that I mentioned before on the weather example, how Claude can extend its capabilities for things that might not have the data for. All right, well, enough about a slide. Hopefully people didn't get tired of my funny accent yet.
So you have a great accent. All accents are welcome. Yeah, Richard Hoffman, thanks for joining us via LinkedIn. So Richard's asking, can Claude 3, for example, count the number of items in a report? Would that be something it could do?
Yeah, we can try that out in particular, how that report is structured, right? When you deal with this type of models, it depends on the input they put into how you format the input is very important, right? But it can give you the items. It's those items are very well defined, right? And this comes back again to the testing part. And we're going to look at after the demo how we can test and build great prompts. But at the end of the day, yes, it can do it. But it depends on what the input is and what is the goal, what are those items, right? Okay. But yes,
so I suppose it's like with all things, good sanitized, well, not necessarily sanitized data, but an easy to understand data, whether, be it the headings or a table or that kind of thing. And then obviously what prompt you're going to ask it for to be able to generate it, to be able to pull that up.
Exactly. And I'm going to come back to these questions when we go through the next section of prompt engineering and give some examples of how this can be tackled with Claude 3.
Excellent. And as Richard joined us, remember we are live here for office hours, so happy to take your questions, your comments, to do with Bedrock and Claude 3 this week. But general serverless questions welcome if we do have time. So yeah, remember we are live. If you're watching, you can see a number of people connecting and seeing us. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let us know, or even let us know where you're from. We've got I'm originally from South Africa. Santi's originally from Argentina. Where in the world are we doing serverless office hours or getting people from serverless office hours today?
Yeah, and I will reiterate that presentations are funnier when I'm not talking all the time. So please ask questions. All right, so let me just jump to the demo. And in this demo, we have this architecture right here, right? I have built a single page application, right, that uses Amazon Incognito for authentication, API gateway, REST API, and then a couple of Lambda functions that will process an image that I'm going to upload and use Bedrock to inference on that image. This is particular use case is related to grocery items that you might have in your kitchen, right? So let's say I go and take a picture of my pantry in my kitchen, and I get back all the items that were in that picture, right? It's a simple example. Probably you want to do more if you're going to productize this solution. But at the end of the day, it shows you how easy it is to gather insights from images using Cloud 3. Now that image is going to be saved in S3. Also, the result is going to be sent to save in DynamoDB and return to the user. There are other things that we're going to do, but for now, just let's focus on this part, on the left side, right? And then once we go through this demo, we're going to go through how we can extend this application and even use more of Cloud 3 to get more insights and even create ads for users according to what they have in their kitchen. So the application is written in Vue.js with Amplify, which really simplified my life a lot when I'm dealing with prototypes. And don't worry, we're going to go through the code soon. Yeah. So I'm just going to add an image. Right? This image will be, this is for my pantry. You can see that we have a lot of things related to cereal bars. We have some juice for the kids. I have two small kids, so you'll see some things for there too. I also included some things that are not labeled on purpose, like these are Cheerios, we have cornflakes, and right in the back we have oats, right? I'm just testing how far the model can go without explicitly showing the brand. So as I did that, I'm just going to process the image, and what I click that icon, it's going to go through API Gateway to Lambda, to Claude 3, and then go back with the result, right? And it takes a little bit. It's just a couple of seconds until it's come back. The latency depends on how big is the image and how much text you're sending as part of the image. Now, it came back with the response. It's pretty fast to be able to analyze an image in that time frame. I want to start with this thinking part. Why is this thinking coming back? I made that on purpose. There is a way that you can ask Claude, think step by step, or think in this specific part of the payload in the output, which usually improves the accuracy, right? And it also is helpful to understand why the model is replying in a way it's reply. It's kind of a way to debugging what is inside the quote mind of the model, right? And in the project, I think it got it pretty well. You see that it's the peanut butter that we saw before, the go-go squeeze, which is the cheese that I mentioned, olive oil, raspberry fruit spread. There is butter kitchen that we use. My wife and I love Indian cuisine, so we had that too. Chickpeas and some other things like the protein bars that I mentioned before. So he got it pretty well just from a picture, right? So now coming back to the diagram, what else we can do with this? I mean, this is cool, is interesting, but I think what it comes later is even more interesting. So I have set up this DynamoDB table to stream to Lambda. And that Lambda is going to use SNS to fan out, which basically is to copy the same messages across multiple queues, in this case, to create an ad and to create an analytics from that information. How they're going to do that? Using Claude 3. And the main reason I made this in this way is to showcase how with the same model and the same API calls, different payload, of course, but the same API calls, very structured, you can get a lot from this model, right? So if we come back to these tables really quick, right? We're going to look at the analytics table first. I'm going to run this, and I'm going to look at this one first. You see multiple of them because I have been testing it, but let's look to the latest one. Right? And I'm going to copy so it's easier to see, open my Visual Studio Code, and just paste it here. And it's going to make it easier to read really quick. And it came back with some interesting analytics, like based on the insights from the fruit products, here's some potential products customer might be interested in. The customer is the person who uploaded the picture. Healthy snacks, plant-based protein sources, convenient meal kits, healthy baking mixes. And you know what? I'm surprised how well it did. I like all those stuff, right? And all of that from a picture that you took from your kitchen products. Now let's look at the ads. Let's see how the ad was done. So I'm just going to change this to the ads table, run this out, and I'm just going to copy one of these, paste it below so we don't lose the other one. and make it easier to read. And it seems to have done a decent job as well, right? So it's kind of putting this into an advertising model. I fill your body with these delicious nutritions, and it put an example of one of the brands there. So it's getting to the result that I wanted to, and all of this is done with the Lambda function and an API call to Claude 3 and some prompt engineering that we're going to look at in more detail. So I just want to stop here, and Julian, what do you think? Do you think this nailed it, or any room for improvement?
I'm sort of impressed how targeted it is. I sort of think that, obviously it's looked at the products and it's obviously worked out that they're vegetarian products, so it's doing that. But even to have like a kitchen gadget or appliance, to me, that's thinking outside the box. I'm interested in how it's able to. That's quite diverse information it's gonna do, and also the marketing copy. It's not as cringy as I thought it would be. You would think AI-generated marketing copy. I've heard the term recently called slop, GenAI slop, where marketing teams are creating a lot of GenAI content, and it's just not interesting, and it's just terrible actually. But this actually seems quite good. I wouldn't read that. I honestly wouldn't read that and think that was GenAI generated.
Yeah, and to your point, this is a simplified version. Usually, you will a simplified version of an architecture to create an ad. Usually you will have more than just a reading model. You might have even an inference pipeline where you pass through multiple models. And that's when Claude 3 also can help a lot. So just to make sure the audience understand here as well, is that we're not saying replace everything with Claude 3, right? We're saying Claude 3 can make your apps even better, right? And you don't need to replace everything necessarily. There are some things that you might need to replace, of course, as usually lives move on and new things come up. But Claude 3 can really augment what you already have. And the integration is really, really easy. You don't need to provision infrastructure. You don't need to onboard a new vendor. You just need to make a new API call from your compute, in this case, Lambda. But of course, it supports other type of computes. All right. Let me check if there are any questions. Looks like we're good. If you have any questions, put it in the chat. I just wanted to switch to the code right now to see how we actually did this. So we're going to get a bit more technical here. If the audience doesn't want to do this, just put some comments in the chat and I will jump to something else. But I do like you to see how this is done and how all this is automated and how you can put all these things together and use it with current tools such as serverless application model and Vue.js with Amplify, right? And get these type of prototypes done. So this project, which by the way is open source, we're going to share this after the call, have two main directories, infrastructure and website. The infrastructure part has, I'm just going to expand this a little bit, has all the Lambda functions that we have been seeing and have been used here, but also a template that defines all the resources that you see in this graph right here. So everything, with the exception of CloudFront and the Amazon S3 for the single page application, is automated by this SAM template right here. And then I want to dive deep really quick on one of the Lambda functions so you can see how this API call is done and some tricks on the prompt that I have done for this to work correctly. So if you look at the app here in the create ads, or actually let's go to the get image data. This is the one that returns back the JSON that we saw before. In this case, what it does is I just asking the model, but each product in the picture, identify the name of brand, the product, and then use this schema. Now, I want to just look at this in more detail and pause here. Previous generations of Claude weren't very good at things like JSON, right? It could create JSON, but sometimes it would create it not even a correct syntax, but certainly wasn't the way that you can just put a schema, right, in the schema way and have references with definitions and come back with that. So if we look at the result really quick, coming back to here, we have thinking and a array of products, which is exactly the definition that I asked Claude to use, right? I asked have a thinking products, which is an array that is a product array, and these are the name, brand, and content attributes that you should use. So from there, Claude was intelligent enough to understand, oh, this is a JSON definition. So I'm going to return it with the JSON definition that's compliant with this particular part of the code. Right? And then I ask to review the items. Right? So this is how you can create simple problems. It's still is in the simple side. There are a lot of other things that we can do. But this is a good start that you can look at to add to your apps. Now, where is exactly the API call? Is right here. This is the API call. It's just a single line of code where you pass the body with the information, in this case, the image on the prompt, and the Bedrock client is just another Boto 3 client for those familiar with Python, but it's also the same experience for other SDKs like JavaScript. It's just another client that you can use. Okay. All right, so that's for the infrastructure part. In terms of the website, there is nothing too crazy there either. If you have worked with Vue.js in the past or JavaScript, you will see that it's not that complex to do something like this, especially using Amplify. The great thing about Amplify is that I didn't need to code the sign in and sign out code. It was integrated directly with Amazon Cognito. So I just import Amplify, and then these AWS exports, this file that you see on the left side, this has my Cognito user pool, my region, and so on and so forth. For Amplify, just take that, and then I can just use it directly in my Vue application right here. And this authenticator comes from UI Vue, from Amplify. So that's another thing that you want to keep in mind is how you can not only use Claude 3, but also use all the other AWS frameworks or products or services that are already available to you and augment from that. You don't need to invent things from scratch, right? This is just the XML page that you see here, right? With definitions. If you click here, it will just expand the image and so on and so forth. So nothing too crazy there either. And how the API call works, that's the final part. How do we integrate this single page application with the backend, with the API gateway that we saw before? Is just a fetch, right? I have this method current session, which just get the token for Cognito and so on and so forth. I pass that, and then that's pretty much it. So nothing really complicated, nothing different than what developers might have been doing already with their single page applications. All right, so I'm just going to pause here, see if there are any questions.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful model to be able to build front ends that integrate with different backends as well. I'm doing a talk soon coming up talking about backends for front ends, and I think in the front end world, people are quite advanced in thinking of different micro front ends, and different parts of the application are going to update at different times, and being able to then connect to different backend services, all in real time via things like Vue.js, hosted on Amplify. It's stored on S3 behind the scenes, and I don't think people realize sometimes that S3 is the biggest web server in the world, kind of thing. Single page applications stored over there. And yeah, this isn't a whole. You can see there's not a lot of lines of Vue.js, and you're just going through API gateway, calling a GenAI model on the back end, and even your Lambda function code wasn't particularly complicated. Yeah, it is deceptively simple to be able to build these prototyping applications. And even though I'm saying prototyping, if you had to run this in production, it's probably not a huge amount you need to change in terms of the scaling capabilities, because things like Lambda, S3, and Amplify are just going to scale.
Exactly. You got it. All right. Well, if there are no more questions,
well, just welcoming Ben Smith from Brighton. He's our front-end expert on our team. Hello, Ben. Thanks for joining us on Office Hours. So, yeah, so tell us all the Vue code we're getting wrong, then you're the absolute guru. But, well, I'm not getting wrong, seeing I'm a terrible front-end.
Yeah, happy to be proved wrong. That's how we learn. So go for it, Ben. All right. Well, if there is no more comments and questions, I'm going to switch back to the slide. I do want to go through some interesting things that you can use to get the most out of Claude 3, right? In particular with prompt engineering and evals or test cases, right? I just take a step back and say, what is prompt engineering, right? What is this thing that wasn't nothing in the if 3 years ago I would ask you, what is prompt engineering, you will probably scratch your head and say, what is this? And now everyone knows about it, and is something that is not that easy. It has some thought to it. It's not just throwing text to the model, right?
No, I'm sure there are job descriptions asking for 10 years of prompt engineering to get new jobs, and that's partly impossible. The prompt engineering for me is changing your Bash or your PowerShell's terminal script to have different colors. That was prompt engineering before a year and a half ago. How things have changed.
Exactly. And it comes back to what is a prompt, right? It's the information that you pass to the model. And a good way to think about this is imagine that the model is someone that is just with a lot of knowledge, but zero context, right? We here are talking, and we know that this is a presentation. We know the context, and you don't need to tell me everything all the time, Julian, right? But in the case of the models, you do need to be very specific on which is the context, which is the role it is, the history of the conversation, instruction, and even examples, right? So that's something that to keep in mind. And the prompt can get pretty complex in a good way, in the sense that you have multiple sections. You can see in the color coded here, such as the task context, examples, output formatting, and even you can pre-fill the responses that Claude will come back with to avoid any preamble, for example, if you want to just jump directly to the response. So several things that we can do here. Now, let me ask you this, Julian. What is 2 plus 2? Can you answer that question for me?
4, hopefully, and this is something I'm...
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't give you any context. You got it right because we were talking and you got the implicit context of Santi's probably asking me what is the result of this mathematical operation. But we talk about models, maybe I meant what type of problem is. That's an addition problem. Right? The answer is different. Or even I was trying to translate this. So you can see that for a single question, a lot of answers can be done if you change the context, right? And that's what prompt engineering is, to set the correct context with all the things that we discussed in the previous slide to make sure the model replies with what is needed from it, right? And how you get a good prompt? Well, it doesn't differ too much of software development practices that have been around for years, decades even. You start with test cases. You start with the requirements, right? Including edge cases. Then you get the preliminary prompt working. The preliminary prompt can be something that you saw in my demo, right? So that's kind of a preliminary prompt. And then you iterate, right? You test and you iterate. You test and iterate. And how do you test? Well, there are ways that you can assign a score to the response of the large language model, in this case to Claude 3. For example, if you are asking for recipes for a specific dish, you might want to just check if that specific dish name is in the response, if ingredients is in the response, and so on and so forth. And according to that, you set a score. That's a great way to know what a prompt is better than another. And even if a model is better than another for use case, how do you know that Haiku is going to be better, how do you know that Sonnet is going to be better than Haiku? You need some empirical data with scores to know that, right? Otherwise, you're just guessing.
So how do people think about this? Because obviously, the whole GenAI thing is also non-deterministic. Every time you ask the question, you are going to get a big or a subtly different answer back. So it's not as though you can, look for exactly the same structure or exactly the same words coming back. How do people think about the bigger picture of testing against a non-deterministic response?
Yeah, and sometimes the test is easy. Like you want to translate something, right? That's easy to test. You just check against another translator, and it's easy. Another type of problem is, for example, give me three different toys that I can make a gift for a 4-year-old that likes science, right? There is not a right or wrong answer for that. It just depends, right? Well, a good way to think about that is what are the items of the response you have, right? Not focus about the specific product, in this case, a specific gift, but for each one of the gifts, it needs to be for 4 years old or less. It also needs to be described in the response. Let's say that we also want to instruction on how to buy it or how to assemble, right? So all those things can be considered. Finally, you can also use Claude 3 to test the responses of the model. So you ask a question about how many, or give me 4 or 3 gifts for a 4-year-old. Then it comes back, and then you send that response to Claude, but with a different prompt, asking Claude, has this question been answered? And please assign a score according to these rules. Right? So there are several techniques that you can use. Some of them are slower than others. Like if you need to do 2 API calls to the model, it will be slower than just checking in your same machine. But sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes you need those type of extra intelligence to automate the test, right? So that's one thing.
And I suppose you could use models against each other. So if Claude does a response, you could use or Claude again to say, based on these three characteristics, does this satisfy the requirements of being a gift for a 4-year-old child?
Exactly. So no focus exactly on the answer, but if the answer has all the correct items that I, as a developer, I'm looking for, right?
Okay.
Or I, as a prompt engineer, that's a new term. And another thing that is useful is to have some test by the end. And the reason why you do this, and this comes from, if people have background of AI ML training, this comes from there. It's like you don't want to overfit your prompt to just answer what you have in your test cases. You want to be knowledgeable enough, or you want a prompt that can answer the question, but not only those questions. You want some generalization in there too. So this test held out evals allows you to make sure that you didn't overfit your prompt just for the test cases and not for what the real users will ask.
So what does overfeed the prompt? Does that mean your prompt is too big, or you're adding too much information into your prompt?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes you just add too many examples. Sometimes you are too prescriptive into just tell Claude, answer only what is in these examples, but there's no way you can have all the examples in the world, right?
Okay.
So it's a combination of things. All right. So now that we know kind of the overall structure of how you should create these prompts, let's look at some of the techniques. And we're going to start with the API call that you need to send to Claude. So you need first you need to pass this JSON formatting with specific roles with user and assistant, and they need to be one after the other. You can't have two users or two assistants in the same in a row, right? You need to have user assistant, and so on and so forth. There is also a system parameter that you can add to add more context. This is what you will put at the beginning of the prompt. Now, the first one, the most important, is to be clear and direct. Some ways I do this to specify which are the rules that you want to follow, or the model wants to follow, right? So these are the rules. Answer this question, right? There is also a way that you can tell it to skip preamble or go straight to the answer like you see in the example. But being clear and direct really helps a lot. Another thing is to assign roles, right? In the example, in the code that you saw, I was assigning the role of you are analysis, or you are an AI assistant that creates ads, right? So you assign roles to improve the accuracy. And here is an interesting example. So if you are there was a test that they was asked to Claude solve this complex logic puzzle, and it incorrectly responded. But if you assign a role for the same problem, it gave the correct answer. So it seems trivial, but it's very important. Using XML tags are very important too, specifically to split the prompt in what are the parts of the instructions that you as a prompt engineer tell it the model to do versus what's the parameters, right? And this comes back to the question from Richard. Like, if you want Claude to read a report, you probably want to put that report between XML tags so Claude knows when the report starts, when it ends, and gather the insights, like the items that were in that report. Structured prompt templates really help, right? I do believe that having a prompt that doesn't change that much, but with the exception of the parameters, is very important. It just makes development easier. Your prompts will be cleaner, and you will be able to reduce a lot. Another interesting one is to pre-fill class responses. You can, when you see the API calls to Claude, you think, well, I'm the user, so I'm just going to put things on the user part of the API. But you can put things in the assistant part as well. If you want Claude to start in a specific character, in this example, if you just want the JSON to start, as you pre-fill with these open brackets, and it will go directly to the JSON instead of doing something else. One of my favorites is to think step by step, like that thinking that you saw before in the demo. That not only improves the accuracy in most cases, but it also improves the visibility of what the model is doing under the covers to get to the result. So if you need to debug how your prompts are taken from the model, that's something that can be done.
So is this literally just putting in the prompt, think step by step?
Yeah,
You're not actually providing any steps, you're just saying think step by step.
yeah, and you also need to tell it to think out loud. So let me show you what I mean with that.
Wow.
So if I go to one of the apps here, let's go to create app. I think I have it here. Actually, in get image data, I have it. So let's go here. You see that in the definition, I use the JSON definition to think step by step. But what I meant before on thinking out loud is that this only works if Claude includes the thinking as a response, right? So that's important to note. Well, if you just think step by step, but you don't tell Claude in which part of the response it should think, like in this property or in between XML tags, then you're not going to see too much of a difference. But when it thinks out loud, it helps the model to get to the correct answer. Another way to think on this, Julian, is that imagine that you need to write an email, but you can't go back. Just write an email, and you can't change anything after you press a key. Right? That's how these models work. But if you think a step by step before, you probably will get a better email at the end, right? If you just write what is your thinking, what you're going to put in the email, what you should include, what should not, and then you write the email, then that's probably yield better results. Very similar is what's happening in this case, right?
So from the thinking out loud, are you then getting that as a prompt response, or this is just all still internal to Claude?
No, you're
the
getting
way it's going to think.
You're getting the response. And actually, let me show you one. I know we're running out of time, but you know what? This is more fun than me just talking about slides. So let's do it. So if I go to the ads table, right? I have an ad, and I also have an analysis here for the ad. This is the thinking of the model. So I just took what the thinking was and just put it in Dynamo for troubleshooting purposes, right? So I'm just going to open this one, put it here so it's easier to read, and paste it here. And this is the thinking from the model when it's creating an ad, right? So the customer seems to have a variety of snack and food items, and it goes through them. And based on this, I think the customer might be interested in healthy, plant-based, high-protein snack, which is true. I like those. And products like protein bars or chickpea pea snack could be of interest. So that came back with this thinking, right?
Because I mean, this is often one of the common concerns people have with GenAI is you have no idea what the black box, what the machine is doing.
Exactly.
Although it's not, really thinking, at least it's you're asking it to come back with the parameters it's used to then generate its prompt. And yeah, certainly if you were using this, even in a customer service example, if a response comes back and there's some strange, customer response, a customer service agent can go, what made you respond like that? And you can understand.
Exactly. And it's actually a great way to troubleshoot Claude's responses. We just jump to the next slide, right? It just not only includes accuracy, but also it tells you what might be going on in what you said, the model, because you don't have access. You can't debug what is inside the model to see where it made the decision or not. The only trade-off of this is that it does include latency, right? It does increase a little more latency, and also it does includes more output. And how this is built, for example, in Bedrock, you get charged not only for what you input to the model, what you ask, but also what it outputs. So that's some things that you keep in mind. Usually it's worth it. Right? I haven't seen a use case where you don't want it to think step by step because it's either slow or too expensive. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
But it's important to make those mentions so people know. All right, well, a little bit short on time, so I'm just going to go through this a little bit fast. But Julian, if you or Dan have any questions, just interrupt me. You can also use examples. This tells Claude how it should behave, and it's very, very useful for the model to understand which tone of voice it should use, how long the reply should be, and so on and so forth. And finally, the prompt with images. So here are some tricks here that you might find useful if you put this in your app. Always put your images before the task, right? The instruction should be at the end. And the reason is because Claude is a little more inclined to give more weight to what comes to the end of the prompt, right? So try to put always the prompt at the end and the image at the beginning. Make sure to tag the images. This is image 1, then the image, this is image 2, then the image, and then the ask. Compare these two images, right? The images need to be in base 64. You have an example here in the right side of the presentation, and make sure to check documentation in Anthropic. It's very comprehensive, and it has been my source of truth for these type of things. Is great. Just make sure to check it out. Speaking about documentation, there are some prompt tools that you can use. There's the prompt library in the Anthropic website that has a lot of different use cases that you can start with. You don't need to start from scratch. Like if you need a time travel consultant, that's something that you can get there too. It's very useful how you can see the input, the output, and how it changes as you modify the system and the user parameters. And finally, we're going to look at 3 API parameters that you can use. Right? When you make this API call to Bedrock, besides the prompt itself and the instruction and images, you can pass some parameters that can change the behavior of the model, which are, I think, useful for you to know. The first one is max tokens. This is the max amount of tokens, which translate to characters that the model would output for that specific API call. Right? It's useful if you want to just truncate something at a specific length because you don't care what is next. You just want truncated and that's it. Also, stop sequences. If you want the model to stop within a specific character, this is useful when you finish the result, for example, of an answer, and you just want that. So you put the stop sequence as the closing tab result, and that will make the trick. And finally, temperature. And this comes back to the randomness that we discussed before, that they are not deterministics. Well, there is no way to make a model completely deterministic, but you can control the level of randomness of the responses with this parameter. As it goes closer to 1, the more creative it will be, which might be good if you want gift ideas, right? As it goes more to 0, the responses will be more similar to the others ones that came before it. And that's useful for fact-based questions, like how do I troubleshoot my TV? Right? You don't want the model to get creative on that. You just want the same answer. So those are some things that you want to keep in mind. And that's all what I have, really. Hopefully, this has been a good use of everyone's time. I'm open for questions. We have some minutes. I just want to make sure we don't close in a rush. So if there is anything else I can cover, please let me know.
No, I mean, that's a super comprehensive walkthrough. I love tying it all together. A question I did have, between the 3 Anthropic models, well, between the 3 flavors of Claude 3 Anthropic models, are the prompts any different, or are you just literally just picking Haiku Sonnet or the other one?
And yes, Haiku Sonnet Opus.
And all the prompts and the other parameters are the same. So the switch between the 2 would be really easy, or are there other considerations?
Yeah, it's just a different parameter you need to put, but the prompt and the API call is the same. Let me share the screen again and show you what I mean with that. 1 second. Okay. So just going to exit this one, go to my code, go back to the Lambda function. And for these demos, I'm using Sonnet, but this is the parameter, right? It's just an ID that you set in the Bedrock API call, right? And then you will change this to Haiku. Haiku also has a different timestamp here as well, but all of this is documented. At the end but just to answer your question, Julian, this is the only thing that you need to change. You change this, and then it goes to the different model. The rest doesn't change.
Okay. And then, obviously, we're talking about Claude 3 today. If people want to look at other different models, how different do you think the different prompt engineering techniques are between the different kind of models? If you're using ChatGPT, for example, is there a lot different you need to do in terms of the prompting, or are the prompting best practices you've given sort of generally applicable? How would people think about that?
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? When you think about these best practices, this has been tested and validated against Claude 3, right? But if you think about it, being direct, right? Being clear and direct, that's not only for, I will argue that's not only for foundational models. It's like if you are asking someone something, you need to be clear and direct, right? Exactly. So there are some things that are useful for all models, and there are others that no. Unfortunately, I haven't compared with other vendors and mostly focus on Claude 3, so I can't tell you exactly which ones might be only for Claude versus which one might be general. That being said, prompt engineering and developing the prompts and the process of making evals, and start with your test cases, start with the requirements, like any other software product that you will develop, those are the important parts. right? And then you use the techniques to fine tune it a little more. But as long as you have the test cases and you iterate over them, make sure you use quantitative data to know when a prompt is better than another, when a model is better than another. Those are the important parts. And then you can add on top of that the best practices for the model that you use, which in this case is Claude 3.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Michael McClure, joining us via LinkedIn. Yeah, any tips on scoring responses or building those scoring rubrics? So I suppose this ties into some of your testing. Yeah, how do you compare the different responses, and other than having a human in the loop, or maybe it is a human in the loop to try and work out how this all works.
Yeah, and thanks, Michael, for joining. I used to work with Michael before,
Oh.
so I'm really glad that he was able to make it. And thanks for asking that question. Well, sometimes it's not as straightforward in how you want to gather those scores, right? One way that I do this is to see what are the specific parts of the responses that should be there, right? So let's come back to the recipe example. For a given recipe, I always want the ingredients. I always want the description of the dish, and I also want the steps. So I can look for those steps in using PyTest or whatever other automated test framework to make sure that those things are in there. Now, if you want to get more complex than that, you can also use either Claude 3 or other models to evaluate the answer, right? And say, did this answer provide a good recipe for a lasagna, right? Sometimes passing the same thing through the models through Claude 3 2 times can yield different better results, right? And then specify which are the rules. The hardest part is how do you define the rules that will give you the scores? And that's something that depends on the use case. I don't have an example right now on top of my mind, besides that recipe thing that I did for a demo some time ago. But at the end of the day, that's it. Is what are the things that you believe it should be in the prompt, and each one of the things will have a score according to the importance of that specific part of the response, and then you iterate from there.
Okay. Richard has asked, could you show the query template again? I'm actually not going to ask you to throw the query template again. Just answer, is it a Claude specific prompt strategy, or do templates help across other models? And I think you've sort of answered that quickly, but I just wanted to say about the query template that actually the example application is all open source on GitHub. So yeah, have a look at that, and you can get the query template and everything, all of that. I just quickly wanted to get to Aram's question. Just about costs of using Claude 3. Now, I appreciate the costs will probably be on AWS's website because it's all via Bedrock. But the interesting thing is, any limitations or constraints that people should be aware of. Anything in your explorations that could trip people up or people should think.
Yeah. So just and as you said, Julian, it's the best way to answer that question is to check the pricing in the public website, right? There you have all the different things there. I don't remember top of my mind, but I do know that the cost is based on how much you use it. Right? So there are two ways that you can use Bedrock. One way is on demand, which is per each request and per each token that you input to the service, you get charged according to how long is your prompt and how long are your responses. Now, in terms of limitations, what I will say is that there are quotas that apply to this. So I believe is around the 100,000 or so, but please go and check the documentation because that changes pretty fast. So keep that in mind. Now, if you need more than that quota, there are ways that you can buy what is called provisioning capacity, which means a dedicated endpoint for you to use, and according to that, you can buy more and more capacity according to your requirements. That being said, I always recommend start with the on-demand endpoint, and only if you need to go to provisioning throughput. On-demand has a very high quota, and it should be fine for most use cases.
Okay, excellent. Well, and yeah, Aram, thanks for joining us from Armenia. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Santi, that was a excellent walkthrough. Brought that up a little bit quickly. Thanks so much. Yeah, really appreciate all your wisdom. Next week, we're going to be talking about serverless platform engineering, returning guests Anton and Alexander and Ran Eisenberg. So yeah, serverless platform engineering being a hot topic of the moment. Santi, really appreciate all the good knowledge. Thanks for putting this all together. Yeah, really interesting. Nice to dive into a single model and find out prompt engineering techniques and how it all works behind the scenes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Excellent. Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody. Same time next week. Bye-bye.